Hi, everybody. It's Shap. Thanks so much for checking out Cutting the Crap with Shap. You are going to be blown away by our guest today. He is Mitchell Axelrod. Mitchell is an author, speaker, businessman, leader. He is somebody who got connected to me through a friend of mine, and actually, he is the founder of axiology. Did I say that right?
I'm not the founder, but I'm one of the 10 people in the world who's kind of a master at this particular science. But I'll tell
So
you more about that as we go along.
So I I got connected with Mitch through a friend of mine, and I took one of his tests. And after I took it, I was like, oh my God, this stuff is crazy good. And as a wellness person, I was like, I gotta find a way to get Mitchell on. So everybody, you are going to you're going to love our conversation. It's going to be incredibly meaningful. You're going to learn something. That's always the goal of the podcast. You're going to walk away with something positive, and you are definitely going to walk away thinking about things in a different light. So, Mitchell, how you doing, my man?
I'm very good there, Craig, or shall I call you Shap?
You call me whatever you like. Most people call me Shap, but you can call me Craig. Either one.
Shap it is.
So why don't
Shap
you
it is.
tell the audience a little bit about yourself, what you do, even why you're here.
Well, I'm here because a friend of mine is a friend of yours, and friends of mine become friends of mine, so he said, you should connect with Shap, and he has a podcast, and you should be a guest. And um, I'll keep it short. I've been in business 45 years now, always self-employed. Um, I've written a few books. Number one best-selling book called The New Game of Selling, which is on Amazon if you like. I've also been a speaker. I've done about 3,500 speeches, training sessions, clinics. I've kind of been in the speaking training game all my life in one shape or form. And about 30 years ago, I was going through my wife and I were going through a challenging time, wound up getting divorced. And it's interesting, to this day, we're still best friends and we're actually neighbors.
Oh my
Um,
God.
yeah, I know people say that all the time, but it's actually it's a very important part of this conversation. I was on the road 100 days a year as a trainer or speaker, but I was home 250 days a year. So I got a chance to raise my son. And when we divorced, we had a decision to make. Um, Neither one of us wanted me to be a weekend dad. So it was like, all right, we're going to have joint custody, a week on for each of us, support each other. And my goal was to stay on the road, continue my career. I was making great money, just having fun, doing what I love to do. But my soul was calling me home. There was no doubt. It was like, I do not want, I want to be home. And in between my soul and my goal was my role. And so the question was, I had what we now call role frustration. Do I stay on the road? Do I keep going after my career, putting that first, in which case I would be harming my soul, I wouldn't be serving it? Or do I go home, serve my soul, which is what was calling me? And so I was stuck. It was a hard decision. And then I said, well, what if I did my soul setting first? And then I did my role setting. And then I did my goal setting. And when I went through that reverse process, everything I've been taught about success is around goals.
Yes.
And when you think about our culture is kind of a measurement of success. How big is the goal? How high? How many? All right. But here I had a conflict with my goal and my soul, and I felt it. And the only way I could resolve it was reverse the order in which I focused my energy. And when I did my soul setting, I basically, I didn't go into a cave somewhere, but it was clear to me that I needed to be home for the next 10 years until he graduated high school. And that by doing that, saying, I'm going to be true to my soul, my main role now became father full time. And 1A was, okay, you got to change your business. And now my goals adjusted. I said, okay, I don't have that goal. And I realized something incredibly important. Our whole success model is upside down. And that's why a lot of people have low self-esteem, as we say, because they're not living up to what they think they should or what they ought to do or must do. So by shifting that model and starting with soul instead of goal, I was able to kind of say, okay, I'm going to stay home. I'll adjust my business. I'll make less money, but I'll be happy.
Mm.
And what's really crazy, Shep, is that I was making almost as much money, but I came up with a whole new way to make money, and I replaced probably 60% of my income. All right. And that over the last 30 years, I've probably shared that whole model, soul, role, goal, with probably 20,000 people. And they just, it's changed people's lives. It relieves a lot of the frustration when you have tension between your goal and your role. Or if you feel like you're not achieving your goal, you start looking and saying, well, it must be me. It must be something wrong with me. Rather than saying, well, maybe my goal was not realistic. I don't have the bandwidth, the time, the resources. So it set me on this journey using this science of axiology, which is kind of where it came from. And for the last 30 years, I've been talking about axiology and the model of soul, role, and goal. And so that's kind of how we got to where we are today.
Wow. I love that. And it's so interesting just listening to you because so much of what you said resonates deeply with me. Because I think about, and I want to share this with people. Hopefully, it will resonate with you. Maybe you can tell me what I was thinking. I don't know. So, when I first got married, I was also a coach, and I guess my competitiveness, being a competitor of an athlete, I spent a lot of time coaching, and um, in the moment of coaching, I guess that validation of doing really well and having some success, uh, it was very validating. It felt great. Kids I was coaching were having a blast and we were doing well, but I was missing the younger years of my children growing up and not spending nearly enough time with them and my wife. But I was also feeling validated. Like I guess that would be kind of like the goal. Maybe I'm off. I don't know. Maybe it was kind of and I guess my roles were confused. Like my role was kind of like, well, am I a coach or am I a father or which is it? And you can chime in if you like.
No. I
Okay.
hear what I want you to.
So
I'm
so
laughing. I'm kind of laughing because
so
this is
basically,
classic.
yeah. So basically, what ended up happening is I coached for about 14 years. Had a lot of success, but I missed a lot of my kids growing up when they were young, when they were like, in elementary school. Now, luckily for me, my kids ended up going to the high school I teach at. And at that point, initially I'd stopped coaching And initially, it was a little bit hard because I invested so much time, so much energy into it. And uh, I did coach again. I coached my son, actually. I coached my son in cross country. And that was a great experience. But I always talk about how I was totally, excuse my language, everybody, I was totally ass backwards. Of And I'm not going to say I shouldn't have coached. I think that would just be plain wrong. I'm glad I coached, but I think the way I set things up with the sole role and goal were backwards. Um, I really my soul should have been with my family and watching my kids grow up, and I think it ended up just not. You can't change it. It is what it is. I mean, that time has passed. You can't bring it back. But I always say that I wish if I was doing it over, I still would have coached, but my priorities would have been different. Doesn't mean I wouldn't have tried hard, but I would have budgeted my time a lot better.
Uh, Life is complicated,
Yeah.
and Monday morning quarterbacking is a it's a ritual of life, uh, and I'm getting up there. This year, I celebrate a very big birthday, um, and I think back, and one of the biggest things as you get older is you don't want to look back with regret. Um, my son's 35, and he's starting to get that at a difficult age of like, I want to settle down, but I still have my idea of what I want to do, my
Mhm.
dream, and it's tough. It's not easy, and it's difficult to make a living, and so I should have done this and I should have done that. And I said, Adam, you can't heal regret with more regret, right? We make decisions in life, and I hear what you're saying. Um, I felt at the time I was fortunate in that I was able to come up with, through my education, through my working, reading a lot, delving deep, and being willing to kind of confront myself. But you can't beat yourself up. What's interesting about this model is there's a corollary model. There's two worlds we live in: the inner world, soul, role, goal. That's us. But we also live in the outer world. And the corresponding words there, the three dimensions: love, serve, obey.
Mhm.
All right. Now, I'm going to give you something. They say that if the first five words in my book, The New Game of Selling, which you would think is all about selling, but it's really not. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Leonardo da Vinci. I've been given a gift. I don't know where it came from, but I accept it and I've used it. I like to simplify things. If you can say it in a word, say it in a word. I love you. 3 words. Simple, but powerful, right? A
Mhm.
phrase. So when you look at this love, serve, and obey model, and this is science, actually, it's based on science, that there's 3 dimensions of value in the world and within ourselves. They're called intrinsic value, extrinsic value, and systemic value. I don't want to get into a complicated way of understanding, but it essentially means uh, systemic value are concepts, ideas, right? Like beliefs and principles and mission and vision. Whereas things that are extrinsic are real, right? You can't show me mission or vision or expectations in the world. They're not real. They're up here,
Mhm.
concepts. But you can show me tree, car,
That's
house. Big difference between the two,
right.
all right? You can't drive the concept of a car, but you can drive. I drive a 20-year-old Avalon, right? I would never buy a new car. That's just me, but I don't at this stage of my life. But it's a devaluing asset. My point is now when you get to the intrinsic, that's where we are as people, right? And if you invert that priority, that's a hierarchy. Concepts are very important. You need rules, you need principles, you need systems, but the system is supposed to serve the people. So obey serves the love. Obey means the law, the rules, all right? When the obey starts to take over and the people start to serve the obey, if you follow what I'm saying, you have an inversion of value. And what's happening in our culture with AI, automation, mechanization, aside from devaluing the human, which is us, we're elevating the value of the machine. So instead of the machine serving the human, obey serves the love, the law serves the people, it's getting to the point where the people are starting to serve the obey. Now, you with me, right?
Yeah.
That's in the world. Now, I want you to take that same model and apply it to yourself. So I'm going to share a couple of quotes with you, if I may.
Sure.
There's a quote about belief. Belief is not merely an idea the mind possesses. Belief is an idea that possesses the mind. Contemplate that for a bit. Carl Jung said, people don't have ideas. Ideas have people. So when you think about what you think about, your belief, all right, here's my mantra about belief. Is like when I read that quote 20 years ago by Robert Oxton Bolt. He was the guy who wrote Dr. Zhivago, Man for All Seasons, right? Won 2 Academy Awards. Great screenwriter, but a brilliant wordsmith. And when I read that quote, it was like, I got to read that again. And I started to think about something, my beliefs, not if they were right or wrong, but does it possess me or do I possess it? And when a belief possesses you, it's very hard for you to challenge it, question it, have somebody criticize it or ridicule it, or give it up. And what if, being as you're into health and wellness, not just body, but mind and spirit, because these 3 dimensions represent soul, spirit, role, body, goal, mind. All right? So when you think about what you think about and you look at your beliefs, I said, I have a new way to evaluate my beliefs. First cut, do I possess it or is it possessing me? And how do I know? If I can laugh at it, question it, give it up, change it, suspend it, or just say, you know what, it's no longer serving me. I possess it.
That's so hard. That's so hard for people to do that.
Yes, I know. Believe me, I've been at this for 30 years trying to help people. So here's what I came up with. I'm always looking to come up with something simple and short. Here's how I came up with for me, and then I share it with others. The question you have to ask yourself, is this belief loving and serving? Remember, belief is in obey. You have to obey it. In fact, so much so that if you disobey something that you believe strongly, it creates an amazing amount of internal tension in your body.
Okay.
What I call dimension tension, tension between your body and your mind, or the obedience part of us, obey your thinking, and the serving and loving part of us, right? And so here it is. If that belief is not loving and serving you, or it's not loving and serving the people you love and serve, why are you holding onto it? And as a punctuation to this, all the beliefs you hold about yourself that are in any way diminishing, depleting, critical, you have to ask yourself, why am I holding that belief? Certainly not loving and serving me. What am I getting out of it? And this is what we should be teaching our kids.
So,
We should.
but my question, and I hear what you're saying, Mitch. I apologize for interrupting.
No, please.
My question is, you said this, and it seems so simplistic, right? I mean, it
Well,
really does.
it's simple.
Right, right. Yeah, it's simple. Well, it seems simple. I mean, obviously, if you have a belief and it's not making you feel better, if it's not serving you well, then why do you have that belief? Is that what you're kind of saying? Am I off base there?
Yes, and it is. It's simple. It's not simplistic from the point of view like, it's simplistic. Like there needs to be more. It's too simplistic.
Hmm.
It's simple because if you really get down to it, everything that we have up here, we didn't install the software. All right. We know when you did that value profile and you rank ordered all those items, you had no idea how that was going to come out. And when I hear it all the time, I mean, how do you get this information? It's like, it's me. And that's just the first cut. We have deeper reports that really break things out. So what I'm saying is that, yes, it is simple. It is not easy.
But why do you think? So I think about I guess one of my question is when you talk about the beliefs, so if I say to you, one of my values or beliefs is that we have the power to make the world a better place. But is that too vague? Is that too
Well,
vague to?
it's a statement, right? It's a belief. You can. How do you define making the world a better place?
Okay, so I would say to you that I always talk about a moral compass. What is your moral compass? What do you stand for? What are your beliefs of your value system? So for me personally, I like to think of myself as um, I stand for being kind to people and being able to listen and not judging and having empathy. Um, those are some of my core values that I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that kind of makes sense or
Yeah,
not.
it does. It totally makes sense. Interestingly, empathy is an intrinsic value. You don't believe that you're empathetic.
Right.
You
Right.
are empathetic.
Hmm.
There's a difference between what we are, who we are, what we do, and how we think. And that's essentially these three words: soul, role, goal, love, serve, and obey, are not just a nice trio. They're actually representative of the three dimensions of value that exist in the universe. Now, we're not going to get into 4D or 5D. We're talking about three dimensions of value, which is axiology, is a science of human value. It's an obscure discipline that I've spent the last 30 years plus bringing to the world. because it's a model for us to understand who we are as distinct from what we do, as distinct from how we think. And in a way, what we do is we show people with the profile, right? How do you think? What do you look at? What gets your attention? How do you see things in the world? How do you see yourself? We all have biases. We all look at,
Yep.
The word bias is angle, means angle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you look at the world through a certain angle. You look at yourself, look in the mirror. Do you see all what you think is wrong with you? Do you look for your faults and your flaws? Do you say, I'm not good enough? Or do you look at yourself and say, I'm actually the perfect me intrinsically? Now, what I do, that's soul, who I am. Now, what I'm not religious connotation, just the intuition, right? In the soul part of us is intuition. That's the voice only we can hear. And what I find, and I've trained 1 million people live over the last 45 years. All right. And people, by and large, were taught to make decisions from up here. And there's a lot of voices up here. And there's software. And there's bugs in that software up here. But we don't know because we're kind of the fish in the fishbowl. We know what we think, but we don't know how we think. And that's the key that unlocks the door to an amazing life. And we have the key because we have a science through the ranking of the profile that we can actually tell you how you think based on these three dimensions, and then say, okay, what are your characteristics that are you? And that's an amazing thing. And when we know how we think, we know what we look at, and we know what we miss. We know our biases. We all have biases. Don't try to say, I don't have bias. Yes, you do. Now, you may be a balanced person, but we all have biases. There's nothing wrong with that. But the most important thing is clarity of thinking. And very much we're inundated by so much external stuff that it's hard to listen to our own intuition. Like, where should I go in a career? How should I use my talents and abilities? Do I fit into a society? Am I more a jockey or a horse? Should I be in my own business? Should I follow my bliss? I mean, all these, I feel very, very much for kids having to make these life decisions in this world that they're bombarded from the day they wake up, the minute they wake up. So a lot of this is saying, all right, just go inside enough. There's no perfect balance. Sometimes, you know, in your life, you're more focused on the goal or the role than the soul.
Mm-hmm.
Other times you're not attentive to goals at all. You're with your kids, you're having fun. That's intrinsic. It's all soul, right? It's just to have another way to look at yourself, look at the world with a different model, and then seek to live a more full life in all three dimensions with the idea that I'm not going to give up the time that's irreplaceable for another goal. All right.
So I find though that I'm listening to you, and it's interesting. I wrote this down on a post-it note, and it said, and it's just got attention indicates where you're looking, clarity indicates how much you see.
Right.
And that really kind of struck me. And one of my questions is, I will say that, I mean, I think that I have a lot of clarity. I personally believe that. I think that I'm generally able to see things. And again, you're right. We all have a bias, no doubt. I generally think that I'm able to see things through a lens of being, I don't know the word, maybe balanced, or
You could.
maybe balanced. Like I tend to see things through a broad lens. I without blinders on, and
That's
and I think I tend to have that clarity. But my question is, and this is being a teacher and a coach and knowing a lot of people, is how, besides them signing up for your course, which I definitely will put in the podcast, but besides doing that, how can we get people or help people to think about, was it love, serve, obey? How do we get people to think about that when there's so many distractions and hurdles that get in their way?
well, um, you know that very often being human means that uh, we may be stuck in inertia. Um, I went back to this belief quote, right? So if you believe something very strongly, first thing you tend to do is if somebody challenges it,
Yeah,
you don't say, "Oh, well, let me hear what they have to say." You
right.
say your reaction is to
Mhm.
defend and protect. Like, you're going to change my beliefs? Come on, you know. And this is where most human breakdown occurs. Different at the human level. I use the analogy. There was once a situation. Imagine the United Nations, and all these guys are around screaming at each other, about ideology and who's right and who's wrong and whose
Right.
God is right. And all of a sudden, one of these people clutches their heart and drops to the floor. And the place goes absolutely silent. And in that moment, what do you think everybody in the room is thinking about?
Well, I think they would think about how they can help this person.
Yes, that all their ideologies, the differences disappear in a fraction of a second.
Mhm.
Or if a child is hit by a car or something that taps our humanity, our vanity and insanity disappear. That's one of my favorite phrases.
I love that.
Insanity and vanity are destroying our humanity.
Oh,
People's beliefs and ideas that the way things should be. So, a big part of this work is to get back to our humanity, our intrinsic value, to value ourselves, to value other people for who they are.
but how do we get people? Okay, you just touched on something. So intrinsic value, right? Like what do we stand for? What's deep inside of us? What's our value system, our belief system?
No, let me stop you.
Go on.
Intrinsic value has nothing to do with beliefs.
Okay.
Intrinsic value, uh, if you think about intrinsic value, let me give you a quick lesson, if I may.
Please.
Okay. Soul, role, goal, intrinsic, extrinsic, systemic. Now,
Mhm.
don't get stuck on the words. Systemic value concept. All right.
Yep.
Let's take baseball. Systemic value of baseball is rules of the game, the concept of the game, how you play the game. That's the systemic value. Extrinsic value is an actual baseball game. All right. You
Mhm.
can't, there's no baseball in the rule book. You got to get on the field and play. You
Mhm.
go to a baseball game. Okay, great. That's the real thing. Intrinsic value. What's the intrinsic value of a baseball game? Well, 1963. I bet you weren't even born yet.
I was close.
Okay,
I was born in 1965.
okay. 1963. My dad was a New York City cop. He used to get into Yankee Stadium for free as a courtesy. But for the World Series, game 3, Yankees Cardinals, we're sitting in the first base side upper deck. Mickey Mantle comes up in the bottom of the ninth. He hits a shot right over our head, right across our heads. Ball game over, walk-off home run. I still get chills thinking about it. That is intrinsic. Intrinsic is the experience of a life. Intrinsic is your kids. It's love. It's experience. It's self-esteem. It's empathy. It's intuition. Those are all intrinsic value. Belief is not an intrinsic value. Belief is a systemic value. Belief is a thinking thing. Now you can believe something, right? So, concept of a house, architectural design of a house, just the concept. And you know what? And here's the big thing. Everything in the systemic concept world is perfect or imperfect, legal or illegal. You follow the rules or you break the rules. It's two-dimensional. Same thing with our thinking. A belief, you believe it or you don't. An expectation, you reach it or you don't. This is the world of perfect, imperfect. Goal, no goal. There's no 50% goal, 75% goal, 99% goal. Goal, no goal. Now, you may be moving toward the goal,
Okay, I was going to say.
but a goal is a definitive, accomplished thing. And it's a concept. We set it up. It's a fantasy. And I'm not deriding it. It's important. It's good. But you can live in a real house. So here's the thing that traps us. In the concept world, we're perfect. Everything's perfect in our heads. You want to get into business, you can have a perfect business plan. The minute you go into business, it's imperfect. See, this is the thing I live by. I came up with this quote 30 years ago. Imperfect action beats perfect inaction every single time.
Okay. Yep.
And in order to get anything manifest from the belief, the mind, you have to take imperfect action.
But that's so hard. But that's so hard for people.
Well, it is because they're looking at life through the lens of those two dimensions. It's either perfect. Well, I can't give that speech until it's perfect. I can't put in my homework until it's perfect. Now, we can get into conversation that parents transfer this to kids. If parents value their children systemically, they have to get all A's.
Right.
They have to be perfect. If you got 9 A's and 1 C on a report card, which grade would get your attention?
Were you asking me?
Yeah.
I mean,
don't think too hard. Don't think too. Generally speaking.
Generally, the C would get my attention.
Why?
Well, because it's not as good as the A.
So what?
Well, I can.
So
I mean,
if you're in the Olympics, and you had 9 10s and a 5, they throw out the high score, they throw out the low score, and you'd have a perfect 10.
Right, but I'm saying to you that when you ask me that question, Mitch, I can tell you honestly that me personally, and this is, I'll say something. I have something called the 9-10 rule. So it's kind of like this. I say this to people. I've said this many, many times. So you're going through your life, your weeks, right? And everything's going fine. Nothing is spectacular. You didn't win the lottery, but everything's going good. Not having any issues. Everything's all right. And day 1, everything's fine. Day 2, when you get to day 10, and something happens. Not major, just something minor. You come home and somebody says, "How was your day?" And you are, "Oh my God, I can't believe that." but you forgot about the 9 previous days that were all okay or good. So when you ask me about the A's and the C, I can tell you honestly that the C would get my attention just because it looks different, but I would not harp on the C. I would
Good,
say, I
good.
would say personally, hey, man, or I would say whoever it was, if it was my son, I would have said, man, Cole, that's awesome, bud. Like, look at those grades, they're great. Maybe see if you could try to bring your C up a little bit. That's what I would say.
And there's no right or wrong answer here.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
kind of a metaphor. Okay,
you don't think there's a right or
it's
wrong? I mean, if
hang
okay,
on a
I know what
second.
you. I'm sorry. Go on.
Yeah, it, I use it as a metaphor for where is your attention.
Hmm.
What I'm trying to point out is we're focused too much on our deficits, on what we think is wrong with us. That's the point. It's not
Yes.
whether you got 9 A's and a C. The idea is what gets your attention. And 9 out of 10 people will admit that the C would get their attention. Now,
Hmm.
what you do with that after it gets your attention is where the rubber meets the road. It's
Yes.
not, it's part one is what gets your attention. Part two is what do you do now? If you say, see, who cares? Move on. I'm perfect. Things are great. Let's focus on my strengths. And boom, you keep going. Or a person might say, oh man, I'm going to stress over bringing that up to an A next semester and they spend all summer worried about, or their parents had an expectation you weren't perfect. And again, not castigating, not demeaning. It's human nature, and part of it is because our value system is not completely understanding the distinctions among these three dimensions. And your story right from the beginning is a story of you make a decision. Every decision we make has a soul implication, a role implication, and a goal. All right. We may have to stay late at work. The guy who says, yeah, I put my family first, and they stay till 8 o'clock at the office, not 5 days a week, 6 days. I had a client, an attorney. He actually told me this. You're not going to believe it. You wouldn't believe it, but it's the truth. Every Thanksgiving, he would not have dinner with his family. He'd be down working in his office. And when he first told me this, I said, all right, this is crazy. He said, no, because I really felt uncomfortable at the dinner table because I felt like, I got to provide, and it's just like nuts, right? I said, do you realize your family wants you to be there? He got all his value from being productive, making money,
Yes.
putting his kids through the best schools. He didn't think he had intrinsic value that his family wanted to be with him. So he made a fortune. He put his kids through a big house, cars, but he was hollow inside.
And probably
Right?
miserable.
Oh, terribly. But he couldn't share this. I said, come on, listen, do the profile. Sure enough, he was so diminishing his self-esteem. He was so focused on what he thought he had to do to have value. He had a misunderstanding of his own value. And when we talked about, like, you're not going to work this Thanksgiving, you're going to go with your family, and they're going to be totally blown away, and it might lead to all kinds of, but this is nuts, right? The point is, our minds can make us think a lot of things that are not in our best interest.
Oh.
All I'm saying is, if you have these distinctions, I'm not saying there's a perfect mix. Life is fluid, changes, being adaptable and understanding that you have intrinsic value which is the value of you as a human being.
Mhm.
You have extrinsic value, which is the value of you in the marketplace and what you can serve. Love, serve. You love you, you serve you and the marketplace. All right. And then you do it in you obey the beliefs for yourself that love and serve you, and you challenge and you question your beliefs that don't love and serve you or love and serve the people you love and serve. Now, is that easy? No. You have to overcome. But you
Oh,
know
oh my
what?
God.
Once you get it and
But
you sit back and realize, that's not a bad way to live. Maybe I'll try that. You try it. See what
that's
happens.
it's interesting you say that, Mitch, because I'll talk to students frequently. I'm a high school teacher, and I'll have a lot of conversations with students about their grades all the time about grades, and they will be like, "Shap, you don't care about grades," and I'll say, "No, that's not true. I do care about grades, but I care a lot more about you actually learning. I care much more about you learning than I do what letter you get, because if you are truly learning and finding value in what we're talking about, your grades will take care of themselves. You are looking at it solely for, I need to get this A because I need to go to this school or my parents are going to be upset, instead of thinking, if I work hard and if I find a passion for learning, then the grades will take care of themselves anyway. So it's like finding that intrinsic value of a passion for learning versus the extrinsic of that grade. Is that right or wrong? Is it?
Yeah. Well, and so the intrinsic is do the best you can, right?
Yep.
Bring yourself to the game,
Yep.
right? Don't do it half-assed, so to speak, right?
Yep.
Uh, the extrinsic is kind of like what you do, and that's where passion. It's not like black and white, like there's a line between soul and role, right? But there is a line between role and goal. Like a lot of people I find that I coach, they're pursuing a goal that has no connection to what they're good at
Yeah.
because they think they have to, they ought to, they're supposed to. And the toughest thing, and as parents, we do it and we pass it on. I want to kind of break the chain. It's like when you think about what you have to do, what you're supposed to do, what you ought to do, right? Um, the question becomes, what do you choose to do? And one of the things you brought up in our pre-conversation that shows up in these profiles is the fear of disappointing other people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a good thing in one way because you certainly don't want to, if you make a commitment, you want to fulfill it. But if you think about too much about disappointing others rather than fulfilling yourself, you're always going to feel like you're unfulfilled because you're more concerned about what other people say and think and might do
Oh,
and this is universal, like probably 8 out of 10 of us. I'm going to be 70. I still have to grab my mind because it's kind of, conditioned in us.
but
Whereas, yeah,
I was just going to say it's interesting. So if my wife and kids were here, and even my students, they would say Shap doesn't care what anybody thinks of him, and I would say that I'll say to kids, so we'll do this thing in class. Well, I'll say close your eyes, and this is what I'd like you to do. Okay, I'm going to call out a number, and keep your eyes closed so you're not swayed by anybody else in class. So we're going to start of how confident you are in yourself. A 1 means you're not confident at all, and a 10 means you're really confident. And I'll watch the kids put their hand up. So how many people are a 1? And their eyes are closed, so they can't see. And you don't have a lot of 1s. You might get, like, out of a class of 25, you might get 1 kid, 2 kids. twos, you get a few more threes. You'll get a lot of kids between 4 and 6, but you'll get very, very few 9s and 10s. And then they'll ask me, they'll say, Shap, what are you? And I'll say, what do you think? And they'll say, Shap, oh, you're definitely a 9 or a 10. And I'll say to them, most of the time I am a 9 or a 10. And I said, here is the reason why. Is I give myself a 9 or a 10 because most of the time I try to do the right thing for others. Most of the time. Nobody does it all the time, but I try to do the right thing most of the time to other people. I say good morning. I say thank you. I look people in the eye. I shake their hand. I try to be helpful. And if that person doesn't like me for being that way, that's much more about their problem than it is my problem. That is how I tend to think about things. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but that's how I tend to view things.
And unfortunately, too many of us lack confidence. You know, there's a lot of psychology that kind of gets jumbled up. And when you think about self-esteem, self-worth, right?
Yes.
Self-confidence, self-image, then you have self-concept. So relating to the soul role goal, intrinsic, extrinsic, systemic, self-esteem, how you esteem yourself is how you feel about who you are. So what's interesting about the profile, we have data, a lot of data. Many of us are more empathetic to other people than we are to ourselves.
Yes.
I'd say it's probably 2/3.
Yes.
In other words, we treat others better than we treat ourselves. And I was trying to think, what could I come up with that could describe this phenomenon? But more importantly, how can I reverse it? Because I was one of those people that I valued others more than myself. And in some ways, I do that still. And then I said, okay, self-esteem is how I feel about me. Empathy is how I feel about others. Compassion, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here's what I have to do. Self-esteem is empathy turned inward. And for 2/3 of us, and we have the data that backs us up, we are far more empathetic, understanding, tolerant with other people than we are with ourselves. We diminish ourselves way too much intrinsically. So if we don't get a goal, we take it out on us. If we're not happy in our role, or if we don't perform to our or produce to the degree that we think we ought to or should, we take it out on ourselves. Somehow we're taught or we're conditioned to believe that whatever happens in those other two dimensions, role and goal, if they don't work out in our favor, we take it out on ourselves.
Yes.
A thing we would never do to other people, we do to ourselves, right?
Yes.
So I say, okay, self-esteem and self-worth, that's intrinsic value. That's no matter what I do, no matter where I go, no matter how I think, I still have intrinsic value. That's why we spend a fortune to try to save people, one individual. I live near a hospital. I had a stroke 4 years ago, thank God. And there's helicopters flying, every other day, flying people in. We will spend an enormous amount of extrinsic material things to save one life, because one life is irreplaceable. You are unique. There'll never be another you. And we need to teach our kids, you are unique, not special, but unique. And you need to find what makes you unique, bring that to the world, I'm not saying that just because you love to do something, you can make a living at what you love to do. Some people are fortunate that they can. That doesn't mean that you can't do what you love to do and make a living somehow else, or find elements of making a living that, or get passionate. Like I like to say, love what you do until you do what you love.
Oh, love what you do until you do what you love. Hold on, say it again.
Love what you do until you do what you love.
Love what you do. Love what you do until
You do what you
you
love.
do what you do what you do what you love. Okay, so yes, I agree with that 100%. Um, love what you do and love what you do until you do what you love. Wow, that is deep. I have to think about that one. I got it because I love what I do.
I can tell that.
I do that. I was talking to my class today. So I teach a lot of strength training. Not all I teach, but a lot of strength training. And I'll say to the students, I said it today to my class. I'll say to them, I said, everybody, this is not class related. It's not. So just hold up. I said, if somebody would have told me 36 years ago that I would get paid to teach kids how to pick up weights, something that I do all the time as my passion, I wouldn't have believed it. So my message to you is, as you go out into the workforce, find something you love to do. And I'll say that all the time. And I'll say also, just remember, it doesn't mean every day's perfect. That's just not realistic. There's tough moments, there's tough days. But when you find something that you love to do, you will have so much more passion for that and be able to give so much more of yourself than if you hate what you do.
It's good advice. That's sage advice. And when you consider that about 2/3 of the people in the workforce um, are unhappy, unfulfilled. Now, part of that is a perception of what work is has changed over the last 50 years.
Yes.
Okay.
Which
So
is BS, by the way.
there's a lot of elements to the onion needs to be peeled, but essentially, um, you've got to look at your expectations. You've got to pay your dues, so to speak. And what I try to tell young people, and my son is 35, so I don't think he's a man. He's not, but when he was young, was saying there was a great book written in the early 90s. The title of the book is often quoted, but rarely attributed to the author. How you do anything is how you do everything.
Oh, God,
How you do
yes.
anything is how you do everything. Now, when my son was a teenager, this was a running battle. Like, all right, he doesn't buy it. Like, I don't have to do everything the way I do it. And he picks some obscure, like doing the dishes or, some menial task. And I said, Adam, one day this is going to make sense to you because you can't always be doing the perfect thing that you love every minute of every day. There are going to be days, just in terms of life itself, that you're going to be doing something that may not be that enjoyable or that you have to. I hate to fill out paperwork. Oh my God, do I hate paperwork? Right? I avoid it like the plague. But if you have to do it to get whatever it is, right? You can either be miserable or you can say, I'm going to fill it out the best I can.
Oh.
I made my first 7 years, I worked in a luncheonette. All right. So we were making food and serving it. This is in the 70s. And I used to get quarters at most. 50 cents was a big tip, mostly nickels, dimes, quarters. One day, a guy calls me into back. We had some tables. He stuffs a dollar bill in my hand. First dollar bill I ever got tip. And I looked at him. I thought, well, you already paid your bill. The bill was like $2. I thought he was trying to pay his bill. He said, no, that's for you. I said, oh man, thank you. I never got that. And he's holding my hand with the money in it. And he says, let me tell you something. He says, you made my eggs were perfect. You smiled, you talked me up, you were chatty, you were nice, let me tell you something. You're worth it. I was 16. Up until that point, nobody ever said to me, Mitch, you're worth it. That hasn't happened a whole lot in my life where somebody now in the world of business, you might hear people say, how often do kids hear, you're worth it? You're worth it. You're worth it.
They should hear it
They should hear it every day. They should
every day.
more than hear it. They should know it. They should know it. They should feel it. They should be it. And when you feel like you're worth it, you feel more confident. When you feel like you're not worth it, or you're unworthy, or whatever message that you're receiving from the outside world or in your head spinning around, that you're not good enough, you're not deserving, you're not worthy. That's the lie. That's not the truth. And so if you start from the inside and you build the strength, the ownership of who you are, you don't have to believe, you know. And that's the big difference between intrinsic value, knowing, and the systemic concept of I'll believe. Now you can fake it till you make it. All right. A lot of us have in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
but it's not really faking it till you make it. It's embodying the future before it shows up and saying, okay, I have the belief and I have the willingness. The belief is the mind. That's the goal, the belief. I have the willingness to act. That's the role, right? The body. I have to act in some way. And I have the soul. I have the knowing that I'm on the right track, that this is the right thing for me.
Well, the soul piece is so critical.
Very critical.
The soul, and it's so funny. God, Mitch, I'm listening to you, man. You're giving me chills, brother. You're making me think about things here because I think about these things all of the time as an educator and somebody who trains people. I think about that like you're worth it, right? That you're worth it. 3 words. Those are so powerful because so many times in society we are so critical of people when they make a mistake. You're not very good. Oh my God, why didn't you do better? You suck. Instead, I don't think I don't want to say ever because maybe when I was really young, I probably said this, but I know it's been a long time before I ever said to a student, you're not worth it. I mean, I can't even imagine saying that, but I think it's not just students, it's people in general. Like, you are worth it. And getting and helping people to believe that self-worth is critical. That self-worth of believing in yourself, having that intrinsic value that you're talking about is so critical.
Yeah, it's it's almost an epidemic, really. I hate to kind of blow it up, but there's so many things, and now in a world of instant gratification,
Yeah.
short attention span, a lack of ability to go deep enough to listen to yourself. When you're listening, 24 hours a day, or minus sleep, and you probably do it in your sleep too, and then,
Yeah.
and you got the world in your fingertips, and
Yes.
you can. So your tendency is not to say, put that thing down for a half hour. Let me go someplace, sit down quiet, and what's important to me? What do I value? Let me get around people who I value and who value me. And we begin to value the intrinsic soul. We begin to say, okay, I got to play roles in my life, whatever those roles are. What roles we give me? What am I good at? So I want to feel competent. I want to be of service. Okay. Humans don't want to just be served. We have a need to be of service. It's a human need. So when there's a disconnect between that need to serve and the goal, which may not be of service to others, or may not be of service to us. Maybe we just set a goal and there's no context to it. There's no alignment between. The more aligned you are between soul, role, and goal, the happier you'll be. If you're misaligned, that doesn't mean you can't be happy. You could be happy and still be misaligned. But say, hey, this is a temporary thing. I see it. I have to put more time in because I need to buy a house. So I'm going to work my ass off for a year, make a lot of money. And that's going to enable me to enjoy intrinsically having a home and a place to live. And now you've got the best of soul, role, and goal.
Oh my God. Mitch, you have a 20-year-old Avalon, right?
Yeah.
So I have been driving, driving since 16. So I'm 59. So I've been driving for 43 years. Yeah, 43 years. After I graduated college, I got my first car. It was an Acura Integra. I had that car for about 13 years. Okay. The next car I got was a Honda Accord. I had that car for 14 or 15 years. The sunroof was leaking, and it was oh, I'll tell you the story. And then my car that I have now is a 2009 Honda Accord. It has rust on the roof, and people will be like, "Oh my God, Shap, get a freaking car, man! You got the money." And I'll say to them, "Oh no, it's not that. I don't need a new car yet. When my son graduates college, my retirement gift is going to be a new car, but I'm willing to wait because I'm not that impulsive, and I want it to be something that really means something to me." Okay, we got to wrap it up. We're running in we're running
No
a lot of time.
problem.
I have a favor to ask. I want you to come on again if you have time. You don't have to say anything yet because I don't want to hold you to it, but I want you to think about it, okay?
Sure.
So, I don't know what to say, everybody. Like, I told you, I told you in the beginning. I said it. I told each of you that Mitch was going to knock your socks off. I said it. I was right.
Well, it's a labor of love. Every Labor Day, I send out some whatever audience I have posted on Facebook. Love thy labor as thyself. Labor we've gotten away from the idea of labor is like, oh, I got to labor over the idea that whatever your labor is, it could be education, it could be laying bricks, it could be, feeding the homeless, it could be chemistry, whatever it is. Love thy labor. It comes back to love what you do until you do what you love. And you may actually find that you can find your love in what you're doing, and it will lead to doing what you love. But if you hate what you're doing because you're not doing what you love, what makes you think you're going to do what you love by hating what you're doing? Right? It's like, okay, this is a stepping stone. I got to serve the coffee. I got to cut the rules. I got to get up at 5 a.m, and then eventually 12 years, 15 years into my career, I found something I loved. I was able to put it together. So love thy labor as thyself, and most importantly, love thyself.
So my question, Mitch, is how can people get in touch with you? Is there, because obviously I'll put it in the podcast, but what's the best way to reach you?
Well, they can go to that website that you're going to put the soul, role, goal. There's some great stuff there, free stuff. Like you don't have to buy anything. So that's where I would direct them. And then they can send an email to Mitch at the New Game. That's my brand. The New Game is selling the New Game of service I'm coming out with this year, more on the business side of my work. And so they can send an email to mitch@thenewgame.com, and I'd love to hear from them.
Awesome. I will make sure I put that in. Everybody, first of all, Mitchell, thank you, my friend.
My
It
pleasure.
was awesome. Just a quick reminder, everybody, please subscribe to the channel Cutting the Crap with Shap. It's on YouTube. It's on Spotify. I'd love for you to support what we're doing. We have amazing guests like Mitchell on, so please consider supporting what we do. If you'd like to be on the podcast, please reach out to me. My contact information will be at the end of the podcast where I put Mitchell's. And as we always finish with, Mitchell had, I was trying to think about this because he had a lot of stuff. He had my head spinning. I had my head spinning, so I wasn't sure where to go with it, but I have it. Finishing quote. Here it is. Mitchell, again, thank you so much. Stay on for 1 second when we're done, please. Here we go, everybody. Love what you do until you do what you love. I dig it. Everybody, thank you again for all you do. You are awesome.